Hey everyone, it's Deanna. Today, we're diving into a creepy crime story. Stick around for the chilling details. On the morning of February 28th, 1995, Regina Krieger's father entered the room of the 14-year-old girl. He intended to check on his daughter, but instead found a bedroom soaked in blood. The body of the teenager remained elusive for a long time, but when it finally fell into the hands of forensic experts, they were struck by the cruelty and the sheer horror that the girl had experienced before her death. The chilling events took place in Twin Falls, Idaho, USA. In 1995, the population of this town was just under 32,000 people. Now it has doubled. The town is small, clean, and pleasant, seeming like the perfect place to live and raise children. However, even in such peaceful corners, monsters in human form exist. Regina Krieger was born on March 3, 1980. Her parents were named Rhonda Freeman and Daniel Krieger. Regina always smiled, had many friends, and a younger brother named Clifton. She enjoyed music and water skiing, being part of the youth ski club based at Myrtle Lake. Additionally, she was religious and part of the youth group of the Lutheran Church. However, closer to her teenage years, unpleasant changes began to occur in her life. In June 1994, Regina's parents divorced, and the child struggled greatly with their separation. The situation was exacerbated by the division of property, which the former spouses could not agree upon. In September of the same year, Regina expressed her desire to live with her father. Her mother was against it, but caught up in property disputes, decided not to worsen the situation and agreed to transfer the child to Daniel. The girl continued to live with her father in a relatively calm atmosphere from December 1994. However, a bit later, serious changes started happening to her. She began behaving differently. Many habits and appearance changed. In January 1995, she got involved with a bad crowd at Berlin Middle School, where she was in the 9th grade. Parents noticed that something was wrong but couldn't get the truth from their daughter. Their relationship gradually deteriorated. Finally, the girl decided to cut ties with her bad company. Regina was provided with support in the form of a psychologist consultant. He was supposed to help the girl cope with the problems that arose due to her parents' divorce. They developed a trusting relationship, which proved to be a good support for young Regina. Later, she informed him that she intended to drop out of school. On February 27, 1995, Regina again expressed her desire to drop out of school and start working. The psychologist convinced the school teachers that the teenager was going through difficult times, giving her another chance. She had to attend a few classes, including exams, which would allow her to earn the necessary credits and not be held back a year. Regina decided to seize this opportunity and planned to stay in school. On the same day, the girl returned home after a challenging day of studying. She lived here with her father and brother, who had rooms on the 2nd floor. Regina's bedroom was located in the basement. That evening, they gathered as a family, had dinner, discussed some important matters, including school. After that, they went to rest around 11 p.m. This evening became the last time Regina was seen alive. On the morning of February 28, 1995, Regina's brother, Clifton, called out to her as everyone had already gotten up, but there was no response. She did not respond to his voice. Clifton then went down to her bedroom and found bloodstains, but his sister was nowhere to be found. The teenager ran and informed his father about everything. He went downstairs and confirmed that his son was telling the truth. The bedroom was empty and there were suspicious bloodstains. After that, the man called the emergency service 911 and began calling all of his daughter's relatives and friends to find out where she was. Father hopes that the girl, as a difficult teenager, had simply run away to a friend's place and was spending time there, but his hopes were shattered when all close friends rejected his version. The police arrived fairly quickly, but law enforcement officers were in no hurry to perform their tasks with particular enthusiasm, and they paid little attention to the crime scene. They took the blanket with traces of blood and a training sword for martial arts. The only thing the officers noted was that there were no signs of breaking and entering the house. So, as they believed, the girl left home voluntarily and could have staged an attack on herself. The father rejected this version. Why would Regina stage an attack, leaving bloodstains everywhere, just to run away? It simply didn't make sense to him. Investigators thought about it and eventually believed the father, initiating an investigation. It's worth noting that at that time, there was no highly accurate modern DNA analysis methodology, and surveillance cameras and other modern techniques were not yet widespread. This significantly limited detectives' ability to assess the scant evidence they already had. Meanwhile, checks and interrogations began. Naturally, the father and brother of the missing girl became the primary suspects. They underwent polygraph testing, and both passed without any issues. However, the father was not ruled out as a suspect because the police simply did not have any other suspects. The father and brother claimed that they were sound asleep and heard nothing suspicious during the night. It was believed that Regina had simply disappeared without a trace. There was a significant amount of blood in her room, indicating a serious injury or active resistance from the girl. At the same time, there wasn't enough blood to consider her dead. It was speculated that she might have escaped, hiding from the attacker, or was abducted by some unknown assailant and might still be alive. However, she must have been familiar with the person and opened the door for them. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain how the perpetrator entered her room without breaking the door or windows. One crucial source of information for the detectives was Regina's diary, which contained a detailed description of events in her life. There was a lot about her parents' divorce and how poorly she felt about it. The police also learned that she had a boyfriend named Isidro, whom she kept hidden from her family, but had been actively dating recently. He was described as a Latino teenager. According to the entries, he lived in Twin Falls, and his grandparents lived in Berlin, not far from the Krieger family. It was described that he had a green pickup truck and had been expelled from school. The police carefully examined these materials and began to search for the guy to get more information about the girl. However, they couldn't find either the car, the parents, or other relatives of Isidro, assuming that Regina had made him up against the backdrop of psychological problems related to her parents' divorce. Thus, she could be struggling with emerging emotional difficulties, so no one attached much importance to this information. The Krieger family was at a dead end. They were desperate and couldn't imagine what to do and how to continue the search. Naturally, everyone hoped until the last moment that the girl would be found alive, and they continued their search, trying to gather information and find new witnesses. About 30,000 leaflets were printed, which were distributed and posted on the streets. On April 15, 1995, not far from the Snake River, the body of a female was discovered, showing signs of significant decomposition. It was located 15 km from the home of the missing teenager. Forensic experts determined that the body belonged to a young woman no older than 20 years old. By April 17, specialists managed to identify the body using dental records. It was Regina Krieger, who had several knife wounds, including a slashed throat. Her death was cruel and agonizing. After this, the case was reclassified from a missing person to intentional murder. The information quickly spread throughout the town. Residents were bewildered and showed high vigilance. The town was small, so the version of a possible serial killer breaking into homes and killing girls caused panic. People were afraid to leave their homes and started locking their doors, as the emerging maniac could pose a threat to every resident. The father of the Krieger family, particularly concerned, had a younger brother of the murdered girl, who was 13 at the time, and he could be in danger. However, despite the increased attention from people, it did not help the case move forward. No information about suspicious individuals was coming in, and there were no leads for the police to follow. After some time, detectives learned about some new circumstances. It turned out that when Regina got involved with a bad crowd, she met drug dealers. One of them was a man named Gilbert Flores Rodriguez. Police speculated that the motive for Regina's murder could be non-payment for drugs that were given to her, a large debt or something similar. At the time of the investigation, Gilbert was 32 years old. Officially unemployed, he regularly traveled between two cities, Berlin and Twin Falls, involved in the distribution of illicit substances. It was known that he was part of a local gang. Overall, he was a very dangerous person not to be messed with, especially not to stay in debt to. Moreover, the substances Regina was acquiring were quite expensive, making it difficult to estimate the amount the girl owed. It could be hundreds of dollars, which was an insurmountable sum for a 14-year-old teenager. However, there was no evidence against him. Later, the police started receiving anonymous calls, with informants claiming that this dealer was clearly involved in the girl's murder. However, when officers tried to find out who was providing this information, the callers would simply hang up, fearing exposure. No one wanted trouble with this criminal element. The anonymous tips provided no specific information, and there were still no clues against Rodriguez. Detectives considered Gilbert only as a participant in criminal schemes involving illicit substances. In any case, the interaction of a 32-year-old unemployed male dealer with 14-year-old teenagers looked more than suspicious. The very fact of distributing substances among this age group was a serious accusation. Nevertheless, law enforcement needed something substantial to charge him. Investigators continued to examine information about Regina, her associates, and one person drew their attention: Regina's friend, who was part of the bad company Cody. He also obtained substances from Gilbert. As it turned out, on the night of the presumed murder, they were also hanging out together with the dealer. The guy was interrogated. He stated that his buddy spent the whole night disconnected in the bathtub. However, the testimonies were very confusing. The teenager was deeply agitated and changed the story several times. It seemed like he was frightened, hiding something, and unwilling to cooperate. As a result, the police were skeptical about everything he told them. Rodriguez remained the main suspect in this case. In 1996, officers actively searched for Gilbert. It turned out that he had been repeatedly detained by the police in 1991 and 1993. Investigators suspected that he was involved in the distribution of illegal substances back then, but they couldn't catch him red-handed to bring specific charges and put him behind bars. To catch the elusive dealer, it was decided to set up a trap. The police detained a guy named Joe, who had previously purchased from Gilbert. They offered him to forget about certain aspects of his criminal past if he bought a batch of goods from the dealer, and they could apprehend Rodriguez. John agreed and bought substances amounting to $1,500. This allowed the police to apprehend the distributor on November 18, 1996. However, difficulties with him were just beginning, as the cunning dealer had no intention of going behind bars and planned to fight for his freedom. Regarding his crimes, there were many rumors. People suspected his involvement in the death of another person, a guy named Blake Morgan Jr., as well as the heroine of our story, Regina Krieger. These crimes did indeed share common features. The young man was also killed in his own home while sleeping when the attackers entered from the street. However, he was not abducted from home, unlike Regina. On April 10, 1996, during the investigation, the names of the criminals were revealed. The police learned that Cody, one of Gilbert's clients and associates, attacked the deceased Blake. The second culprit was Jesus, his stepbrother, who had no qualms about having a relative involved in criminal activities. He was a real role model for him, someone he incredibly respected and did everything he was asked, completely submitting to Rodriguez, and it was not in vain. As it turned out, Gilbert replaced his father and was preparing him to assist in his criminal activities. The criminal attack on Blake was due to a debt for substances. The guy did not use them. The reason was Angeli, who was dating Hyper at the time. She claimed that Blake had once insulted and hit her, and Rodriguez decided to take revenge. All of this led to Jesus pointing a 9mm gun at the guy's head on April 9, 1996, just 2 weeks before Regina's death. The evening before, a group of hooligans and Blake accidentally met in a bar. Gilbert immediately told his stepbrother that he wanted him to kill their common enemy, who had treated his girlfriend disrespectfully. The criminals decided to plan this crime more carefully and did not attack in the presence of witnesses. Instead, they broke into Blake's house around 2:30 a.m. However, they left because they couldn't find anyone inside. This happened the night after the bar meeting, but the perpetrators returned around 3:30 a.m. and were able to find their victim asleep. The door was kicked down. Cody and Jesus committed the murder. Blake was shot in the head. It was evident that Gilbert was behind all these heinous crimes. However, he acted through others, staying in the background. Therefore, he could not be directly linked to these acts. Later on, all 3 criminals were arrested and held behind bars. They were charged with first-degree murder of Blake. However, they were not even considered suspects in Regina Krieger's case at that time. Law enforcement did not even attempt to connect this crime to Regina's case. For some completely unclear reason, detectives ignored the statements of anonymous witnesses who had previously contacted the police by phone, and they didn't believe rumors that the crime was similar. The dangerous dealer was in prison awaiting sentencing. During this period, the Idaho State Drug Enforcement Division tried to find out the identities of the informants. During this time, Gilbert allegedly mentioned, among other inmates, that he also wanted to know the names of these people. Supposedly, he had already dealt with 2 informers and intended to do the same with the others. On June 26, 1997, Gilbert was officially sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, he was released after serving only 10 years of his sentence. For some completely unclear reason, the police suspended the investigation into Regina's case. Detectives never linked him to the dealer, even though all the threads led to him. For many years, folders with evidence and witness testimonies gathered dust in the archive cabinet. A new breakthrough in this investigation only occurred thanks to Gilbert Rodriguez's accomplice, Cody Thompson, who also associated with the dealer. The guy kept his secret for a long time, which was finally revealed. This allowed putting a definitive end to the brutal murder of the girl. In 2013, a new investigator decided to reopen the case. First and foremost, he reviewed all the evidence and proof collected by his predecessors. While examining crime scene photos, the investigator noticed a blood trail that clearly indicated the victim had been dragged down the stairs and taken to the backyard. How the previous detectives missed this was unclear. The investigator carefully evaluated all the witnesses, and Cody, who was in prison serving a life sentence, caught his attention the most. He had previously given confusing statements about the night when Regina was abducted from her home. Entering bars as a teenager, Cody had now reached the age of 31. His criminal history included severe offenses such as rape, burglary, escape where he attacked a supervisor, and the murder of Blake. Finally, after more than 2 decades, my law enforcement colleague connected the dots that seemed obvious in hindsight. The detective had no doubt that these criminals had killed Regina. However, they all remained silent. The investigator then reached out to one of Cody's former cellmates. He was a life-sentenced inmate who entered prison in 2009. With nothing to lose, the police managed to persuade him to cooperate. Thanks to his testimony, the chain of events on that tragic night, when the 14-year-old girl was brutally murdered, was reconstructed. Late in the evening on February 27, 1995, Regina went to bed after 11 p.m., just like her family. Everyone fell into a deep sleep, not expecting anything horrible to happen that night. Meanwhile, Gilbert and Cody aimlessly drove around the neighborhood in a car when the dealer remembered he had some unfinished business and needed to stop near the closest house. Gilbert parked the car in an alley near Regina's house. Cody stayed in the car, watching his friend navigate through the bushes and jump over the fence, using a back entrance to enter the house. Cody remained in the car, observing what was happening. After some time, Gilbert appeared. He signaled to Cody, who got out of the car. The dealer told him that things didn't go as planned, and he had messed up, so he needed help. After that, Gilbert returned to the house, then headed back to the car with a heavy object wrapped in a bloody blanket resembling a human body. Cody helped load the girl's body into the trunk, but couldn't get any information from the killer about what had happened. The criminals drove away, but not far from there, Gilbert buried the knife he used for the execution. After that, both of them went to a party where Rodriguez flaunted a shirt with bloodstains. Probably party participants called the police and shared their suspicions about him. Then the criminals stopped at a friend's house where they changed clothes and washed off the blood. Afterward, they drove about 15 kilometers to a bridge over the Snake River. At this point, Cody started to panic, and Gilbert, aiming a gun at him, told him to throw the body into the river from the bridge. The juvenile delinquent complied. Then Cody returned home and barricaded himself in his room. He screamed in his sleep and, in general, behaved very nervously, attracting the attention of his family. However, the boy did not know whose body he was throwing off the bridge. He had no intention of talking about it, as he was terrified of Gilbert, who had threatened him. The boy tried to forget about it like a bad dream. Only later, in school, Cody finally realized that it was Regina who had disappeared from her home, and everyone was looking for her. He panicked because he could essentially be considered an accomplice. Therefore, he kept silent about it. The teenager kept this information to himself, partly because Gilbert also threatened not only him, but also his family. Then the detectives discussed this with Cody, and he confirmed all the information provided by his former cellmate. Due to his cooperation with the police, he was not charged in Regina Krieger's case, but at that point, he was already serving a life sentence and had no chance of getting parole. On February 20, 2019, the dealer Gilbert Rodriguez, who was free at the time, was arrested on charges of murdering Regina Krieger, but he refused to admit his guilt. Afterward, new witnesses came forward, claiming to have seen the suspect at a party on the night of the girl's murder wearing blood-stained clothes. People said he was covered in blood but not injured. Additionally, several people immediately witnessed him burying a knife nearby. Several anonymous informants, who had previously provided tips to the police over the phone, also came forward. In October 2021, 58-year-old Gilbert Flores Rodriguez was found guilty of first-degree murder in the case of Regina Krieger. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. It took 26 years to reach this verdict. The outcome brought relief not only to the victim's family, but to the entire town. Everyone was pleased that the dangerous criminal was finally behind bars and would never be released again. Thanks for joining today's crime journey. I'm Diana, your guide in the shadows. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's keep exploring mysteries together. Stay curious, stay alert, and see you next time. Take care.